Levi Wampler with MMA Striking Coach Association. Today we're speaking with Guru Mark Crafty Denny of the Dog Brothers. How are you doing today?
That would be Mark Crafty Dog, is sort of the sober cat. But anyway, yes, I'm glad to be here.
Good. Could you tell us how you got your start in the martial arts?
Well, growing up in New York City, had various incidents that are part of the New York experience, being chased by junkies down subway platforms, or having, three guys jump on my bicycle in the park, or getting jumped by four guys on the stairs in school, and after getting stomped a bit, they took my wallet, that kind of a thing. And then my summer between college and law school, I wound up in Mexico, and there was a fight down in southern Mexico in the state of Chiapas, where a Mexican friend of mine and we had picked up these two blonde American girls, and some of the locals were all hot to trot with them, and they grabbed one of the girls and started dragging them off, and so there was a big fight, the four of them against the two of us, and we wound up in prison for 3 days, and had some additional adventures in prison, and it all worked out pretty well, but I got to thinking I didn't want to have to depend on luck that much the next time, and so I made a mental note that I really needed to get serious about developing some skills. And the last semester of law school, there's a man by the name of Sifu Paul Vizio of Fu Jiao Pai, which is Tiger Claw Kung Fu, which is a pretty serious Chinese system based in the New York area. There's a substantial Chinese community there. Has a lot of iron palm and so forth. But he was also the PKA kickboxing champion. And his excellence impressed me very much. And the class started with 35 people in it, but he was using it for his conditioning, for his fighting. And so by the end of the semester, there were only 6 people left in the class. And I was one of the 6. And the martial art bug a bit, and then when I went down to Washington to work for a year, I continued in, the only thing really there was some Taekwondo, so I did that, working on my legs, and then I got out to L.A., and I was blessed to stumble across Goronosano's Kali Academy, and walking in there, I knew I had found what I was looking for.
Could you explain what Kali is to us?
Kali is one of the names of the Filipino martial arts. The Philippines have over 1,000 islands, over 100 languages, and so the same word can have different meaning in different dialects or completely different meaning, and so the name of the art in the Philippines is it's often referred to as eskrima, it's often referred to as arnis. There are some groups that use the name Kali. For some people, the term Kali is controversial, but it's the term that I learned from my teacher, Guru Dan Inosanto, and it's amongst the most common names here in the United States. It's developed out of the tribal warfare over centuries in the Philippine archipelago, so it's a very weaponry-oriented system, sticks, machetes, knives, small swords, as well as empty hand.
Okay. And why do you think Kali should have more of a presence in MMA competition?
Well, because I think it works. I think the name for that I've created for the subsystem in Dog Brother Martial Arts is Kali Tudo, which is something of a bad pun of the Brazilian term Vale Tudo, which is often pronounced by Americans as Vale Tudo. And if you think of the words valid, total, that would be it's the Brazilian Vale Tudo, valid, total. It's the Brazilian Portuguese way of saying anything goes. So this is where the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighting started, in the Vale Tudo of Brazil. And so before the UFC and in the early days of the UFC, they allowed headbutts, they allowed kicks and stomps on the ground, they allowed all kinds of things which are not, they even allowed groin strikes, all kinds of things which are not allowed in the current MMA context. And so with the name Kali Tudo, what I'm looking to say is that the Kali Salat is blended with the Vale Tudo. So I'm not suggesting this in lieu of or style versus style. I'm saying that that this method has a lot to offer for the person who's interested in mixed martial arts. However, that is not my principal purpose. As I organize Dog Brother Martial Arts, the mission statement is walk as a warrior for all your days. And so the area in which we first became known and it received public attention was for the real contact stick fighting, the term being intended as a contrast to what was is sometimes called full contact stick fighting, which is the padded sticks, the padded competitors' tournament form of stick fighting. And so, yes, they were allowed to swing as hard as they could, but the sticks were padded, the competitors were padded, and so we just I chose the term real contact to make a contrast there. And so we have the real contact stick fighting, and at the other end of the spectrum we have the material we call die less often, which is the interface of gun, knife, and empty hand. And one of the promises of Kali, of the Filipino martial arts, is that the movements of the empty hand are just like the movements of the weaponry. And so the question during some internet brouhahas came out, well, why don't we see it in the cage? And a lot of people would say, well, and it's too deadly for the cage, and things like that. And I never really cared for that kind of a response. And for me, the answer why we haven't seen these movements in the cage, or we're starting to see it here and there, but at the time the question was asked, we hadn't, is twofold. Is that the movements had not been tested in the adrenal state with weapons by most people with these skills. And of the people who did do the stick fighting, and that's a very small number within the Filipino martial art community in the United States, most of them fought single stick. So if you're going to be transposing the movements that you learned in weaponry fighting to empty hand, it's going to be a lot tougher if you've only used one arm, because in the empty hand fighting, obviously, you're going to want to be using two arms. And in my stick fighting, I'd done most of my best fighting as a double stick fighter. And so having hit people with these movements with double stick, it made more sense to me to be using these movements empty-handed. And so I began experimenting with this back when I was training at the Rico Chiapparelli's Raw Gym, which is a pretty serious MMA gym in Los Angeles. Rico was the two-time World Wrestling Champion, having a prodigy under Dan Gable, and also in the gym was Russian wrestling champion Vladimir Matushenko, who challenged Tito Ortiz for 1 week notice with just 1 week notice after Vitor Belfort cut his elbow. He stepped in and went the distance. Frank Trigg was at the gym. He challenged Matt Hughes several times for the UFC title, and a lot of serious people went through that gym. I got to work out a bit with Lyoto Machida, Waleed Ismail would come through there sometimes. A lot of very serious people there. And so while I was there, I was in my early 50s at the time. And so obviously the guys had to, that I sparred with, a lot of pros there, serious amateur fighters and so forth, they had to dial down their physicality to what I, as a guy in his 50s, could handle. But in the context of that play, that's where I began researching this material, taking the double stick movement and applying it to empty hand. And first time you step out there, you get some strange looks. People looking like, who is this crazy idiot? I didn't know they still made people as foolish and clueless as this. And then if it had gone badly, they'd still be telling stories about this guy who was a complete idiot. But fortunately for me, it seemed to work a goodly percentage of the time, and it was around then that we shot the first of the 3 Kali Tudo DVDs. And Rico Chiapparelli had some kind words in there, and Frank Trigg had some kind words in there, and so that is where it began developing. So for someone who's just looking at this from an MMA point of view, there's some things there that can help you. there's plenty of stuff there where we just say MMA does it just great and continue doing that. But because our criteria, excuse me, I'm jumping around here,
Sure.
but there's also some areas where I think that this approach and methodology offers some substantial advantages. And so for someone looking for an edge, that this can be of use. But my mission, my purpose, is to prepare the empty-handed experience of these movements in the ritual adrenal state of mixed martial arts, so that they can then be used in die less often category, interface of gun, knife, and empty hand. In the street, it is very common that you will not have enough time to determine whether a motion coming at you is armed or not, in time to choose a different response accordingly, and that there is a genuine reactionary advantage in being able to have one idiom of movement regardless of whether the other person is armed or not. But if your only adrenal experience empty-handed is with what I call generic MMA, then you're not going to be doing weaponry response movements when you're in the street. You're going to be doing your empty-handed movements for empty-handed attacks in the street, and in the street that can go sideways, go very badly wrong very quickly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I'm following. That makes a lot of sense. So you're just saying that, I mean, you can do all of it. So you'll be able to do self-defense, be able to do mixed martial arts, and
yes.
using Kali. And then all of your moves for Kali have they're different than what people normally see in an MMA ring. So you can have kind of that unorthodox movements, unorthodox patterns in striking.
Exactly.
Okay. Good. That sounds great. Could you tell us what you think a mistake is when people are training for Kali or for MMA? Like, what do you see a lot of fighters doing wrong?
Let me clarify. You're asking Kali people, or the question about Kali people or MMA people?
Well, it could be your people that you're training for Kali Tudo to do MMA, or just general MMA, whichever one you want to touch on.
Well, I have tremendous respect for MMA. I was a judge at UFC 10. That was the one where Mark Coleman took the title from Don Fry, and Tank Abbott wasn't allowed to compete because he had beaten up Pat Smith in the elevator at UFC 9, to place that in historical context. I've been around the MMA scene from the beginning, because it was around UFCs 3, 4, and 5, somewhere around there, that the UFC approached us about being a special event between the semifinals and the finals. This is back when it was a tournament, and they wanted to have something so that both finalists could have a fair amount of rest before going in for what would be their third fight of the night. And Senator John McCain was running around saying it's human cockfighting, and there's a lot of politics going on, getting the sport a place where it could take place. At UFC 10, I think we were scheduled for somewhere in upstate New York, and at the last minute, the authorities shut it down, and we wound up somewhere in Mississippi or Alabama. And I'm sorry, I'm jumping around here. I'm trying to throw out too many things at once. The question was
looking for what you see as mistakes fighters make when
So I'm just talking about. I have a lot of respect for MMA. Point being is I've been following this from the beginning. I'm a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu under Higa Machado. So I'm really hesitant to say there's a mistake. Let me put it this way.
Sure.
I think where sometimes people limit themselves is there gets to be this syllogism where if you don't see it in the cage, it's because it doesn't work. And that tends to create a mental block against being willing to explore things that are currently not in the cage. But if you look at the evolution of MMA over time, it started out with jiu-jitsu is best, and then the wrestlers started saying, well, it matters how you do a takedown, because if we're on top and we learn to keep our elbows in so we don't get armbarred or triangled, we can start pounding away. And so then when it mattered how it went to the ground, then all of a sudden the clinch game, the Greco-Roman game, the Muay Thai clinch started coming into effect. And then as that started becoming present, well, then the striking skills of Muay Thai became more prominent. And, the game continued to evolve. And so I simply regard this as an evolution that is beginning to happen. I have people reporting back to me of successful experiences that they've had after training with me at the amateur level, and I would dearly love to get my hands on somebody with the athletic skills and so forth that I could take pretty far.
Mm-hmm. No, it's great. It's great. It's a good point that you have to really keep your mind open and look around for other things so you can be different than the person you're fighting.
Yeah, I think there's some real structural opportunities, advantages. I don't want that to be portrayed as something this is better than that.
Right.
That's not my point. But I think for someone who has an open mind here, they have an opportunity to develop something that can really help them in real time quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Could you tell us some of your favorite training materials or resources? Any favorite books, DVDs, workout equipment?
Well, forgive me the moment of advertising here, but we have 3 DVDs in the Kali Tudo series available at dogbrothers.com. The first one, Kali Tudo 1, is I spend a lot of time on the footwork aspect of it. The footwork is different. Kali footwork is based on triangles. And so what I did for the transition point is I took the mirror lead game of Frank Trigg, which is to say right lead versus left lead. I saw Frank sparring one day and was very impressed with how he went about things. And so he shared with me what he did, and he had no objection to my using the material in the DVD. And so having shown something that the MMA half of the audience, the other half of the audience being the FMA audience, the Filipino martial art audience, that there were transition points, what I sometimes call portals, the portals into the Kali structure out of an MMA structure, and to show now here's where the triangles are and so forth. Then in the second DVD I call the running dog game, which is where we start seeing the Kali striking. But by having the running dog game is an anti-guard game. It's when you're on top and the other man, the opponent has guard. And so because the ground is behind him, he can't move away from you as you do the Kali striking. So that seemed to me, in terms of teaching progression, the next logical step in how to present the material. And then the third DVD is the standing striking game, where you really start to begin to see the Kali striking in the standing open range. And one of the potential weaknesses of the Kali Tudo material, and everything, as I look at things, everything has a weak link. Nothing beats everything. And so the potential weak link is for the guy who's got a good elevation drop and shoot, or for the guy who's got a good front leg. And so for the co-instructor on Kali Tudo 3, I brought in my friend Kenny Johnson, and Kenny's the MMA wrestling coach to BJ Penn, to Anderson Silva, to the Nogueira brothers, the who's who list of world-class MMA. And I knew him from the Raw Gym and from at Higgin Machado's, and I took a private with him because there was a particular grappling position that I thought he could help me find a solution with. And he was, as he then saw what I was doing with the Kali Tudo, he was intrigued, and we began exchanging with each other. And so Kenny was there for the third one in the series to show where, if someone's trying to shoot against us while we're doing the Kali Tudo striking game, that what were some good classic responses for that kind of a situation. So for someone who's interested in this material, that's where I would go.
Okay, great. And could you share with us some of the best advice your mentors have given you?
Well, my number one influence is Guro Asano, who's really quite a remarkable man. And one of the things we say in Dog Brother Martial Arts is walk as a warrior for all your days. That's the mission statement. And I see him exemplify that in how he lives and how he trains and how he stays open-minded. And girls in teachings with Kali have, they've just impressed me very much. And he's, in so many ways, very calm-centered, and for me, in a sense, a holy man. I was having a bit of a problem with a particular individual who was running around talking smack about me, and he has a wonderful way of doing it with very few words, but basically, putting it in my words, not his. He said to me, Mark, he says, look, people see you fight. How many people have seen you fight? Whatever that number is. He says, is there anything that this guy can say who can make people think less of you? Is there anything you can say that can make people think more of you? Bottom line, don't worry about it. Don't worry what people say. It will all work out. So if you just take care of your own business and look to improve yourself and not think of yourself in terms of your relation where you rank with others, then it becomes a lifelong path. That makes sense? No,
that's good information, yeah. Well, thank you for sharing with us today.
My pleasure. So I hope that this comes out okay. Sometimes the spoken word wanders a bit, but I appreciate your being interested.
Sure. Hi, this is Levi Wampler with MMAStrikingcoach.com. We've been speaking with Guru Mark Crafty Dog Denny.
Thank you very much. The adventure continues.